Good evening. It's just, I get a kick every Wednesday afternoon sitting down and seeing all your faces, seeing so many old friends and some new friends there. My name is Monty Paulson. I lead the Passive House team at RDH Building Science, and I'm just grateful to be healthy and alive today. So please make sure you have your camera turned on. Please raise a glass with us. Look that cheap, little, creepy plastic lens straight in the eye, and drink to the health of everyone who's thinking about getting into a Passive House project once we all get back to work again. Cheers.
Cheers.
I'd like to thank Passive House Accelerator. We have the t-shirt, some of us.
Woo!
Yeah, I know. For hosting this happy hour, as well as the after party to follow. We have a fantastic presentation by Tessa Smith coming up in a few minutes. But first, let me introduce my co-host, Prudence Ferreira.
Hey everyone, I'm Prudence. I'm the Passive House Practice Lead at Morrison Hirschfield. And welcome for your first time or for your multiple return time to our happy hour. On behalf of the entire Passive House community, I'd like to give a special welcome to any newcomers and hand it back to Monty.
Yeah, we have noticed more than a few new faces on these calls the last few weeks. We're honored that you've taken time out of your evening to join us. We're working to make Passive House Happy Hour a place that welcomes newcomers. We're aware that sometimes Passive House people can be a little bit insular, some a little bit geeky. So toward that end, let us share a really short video that explains Passive House in 90 seconds. Zach?
All right, here goes.
Passive House explained in 90 seconds. Does your house have a heater in the basement or maybe a fireplace? Probably also a central air conditioner or maybe a window unit. Did you ever wonder if it was necessary? In 1991, a physicist in Austria, Dr. Feist, built the first passive house. Here's what he did. 1. Proper insulation. It's just like wearing the right winter jacket. It also doesn't need a heater. 2. No air leakages. There should be no holes, small or large, to let hot air out of the house. 3. No thermal bridges. A thermal bridge is like a road for heating energy in which warmth can travel right through your walls. As a matter of fact, most of our houses have thermal highways in our walls where heat can easily travel to the outside. Plus, the house needs proper windows most of the time with triple pane glass. It needs to be oriented properly so the sun can heat it in the winter and shade is provided in the summer. And it uses an HRV, a device that provides the inside with fresh air without letting the heat out. Add all these things up, and it turns out your house doesn't need a heater or air conditioner. So where does the heat come from? A passive house needs 90% less energy, and that can easily be supplied by your body heat, the sun, your appliances, light bulbs, and even your TV. This saves you a lot of money on your heating bill and helps preserve the environment.
Did we make it in 90 seconds?
You bet we did.
Well, there you have it. I've watched that many times, but it's still fun one more time. Hey, so if you are new to Passive House, you may have noticed this is a very open source community. You will find guides and training at numerous websites at Passive House Institute, based in Germany, at Passive House Institute US, based in Chicago, at the North American Passive House Network across the US, as well as great guides, especially printed guides online at Passive House Trust in London. If you're new and you find any of all of these types of kind of Passive House groups confusing, my advice is get used to it. I've been doing this for 10 years and I'm still confused. Passive House is growing wildly and chaotically and sometimes unstoppably. So we invite you to dive in. And to facilitate that, we're going to throw you all into breakout rooms for just a few minutes so that you can kind of meet some new people, maybe welcome a newcomer, or if you're a newcomer, meet somebody who's been at this for a while. Zach?
Yeah, okay, so here I'm going to start the breakout rooms and we'll get back in 3 minutes. Please do some rapid fire intros. Here we go. So first, Emu Systems, who are expert at trainings for Passive House tradespeople and do a lot of on-hands training, are pivoting to a hands-online format for their CPHT course this summer. So visit the Emu Systems website for more details. The New Gravity Housing Conference it is scheduled for August 6th and 7th. It's a fantastic conference. I believe Ed Mazria will be speaking from Architecture 2030 at the conference this year. Lots of great speakers. Call for proposals is due May 22nd. You can see the URL there. Again, I'll paste this into chat. Monty Paulson, our host for the co-host for today's happy hour, is teaching the pattern language from Passive House workshop, examining how to bring high performance buildings and cost-effective design and construction together. And that course starts on May 19th. It's through ZebEx, and you can register on that site. NAPHN has its annual conference, and they're moving to a virtual format, and I've been hearing about it. It sounds pretty cool, pretty exciting, kind of experimentation with the new online format, and really thinking about how to maximize that. So they're going to be doing the conference over the course of 6 Wednesdays. So 6 Wednesday afternoons beginning June 24th Eastern Time. And going through July 29th. So go to naphnconference.com for more details about that. Passive House Institute US has tomorrow a modeling webinar training for the new Woofy passive shading tool, and it's eligible for AIA CEUs. So you can see the details there, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And I wanted to share just a little bit about Living Future. So the Living Future Conference 2020 online conference is starting tomorrow. And I definitely encourage folks to attend. It starts tomorrow, it runs through Friday. And there are a number of sessions that are eligible for FIAS continuing education credits as well. And then finally here, I want to thank our sponsors, our founding sponsors, Mitsubishi Electric, Zola Windows, and RDH Building Science for making our work possible, as well as our patron sponsors, Morrison Hershfield and 475 High Performance Building Supply. Thank you, everyone. I'll paste this into the chat, and with that, I'll hand it off.
Prudence.
Yes, I needed to unmute myself. So it's my thrill to introduce you all to Tessa Smith. I've been doing Passive House consulting for 10 years, and I've met a lot of and trained a lot of Passive House consultants. And she is hands down one of the funnest ones I know. And just to get Monty's goat, that's with a PH, fun. So she's an architect and principal at Artisans Group. Her work has been featured in books. We saw one of those from Lloyd at the beginning. He showed and told one of the books that she's in. So those books on Passive House and Prefab. And she's also had her work in the New York Times, Seattle Times, Dwell, a Shiro of Passive House. She's also been the 3-time award winner of the FIAS Best Project by a Young Professional. And she's designed many Passive House projects throughout the Passive House or the Pacific Northwest region. Paradoxically, she owns the world's leakiest, coldest, but coolest mid-century modern house. But on the flip side, she probably has the hottest costume collection of any Passive House consultant I know. I'll let her tell you about that in the after hour. With that, take it away, Tessa.
All right. I love it when I get an introduction from you because you make me sound so much cooler than I am. I feel like if I ever have to do an online dating or anything, I'll have you write my description.
Right on.
Great. Well, as Prudence said, I'm Tessa Smith with the Artisans Group, and I'm a principal and architect with them. And I have 2 co-principals, Randy Foster and Rusa Cassell. I believe Rusa is on this call somewhere. And we are a small but mighty firm. We're women-owned and women-led, and we work all over the Pacific Northwest. We have about 8 to 10 employees, maybe a little bit less these days due to some layoffs, but we're working hard to minimize that. And we do a lot of projects in the Pacific Northwest, and particularly this year and the year before, we've started to reach on a more national level into some other markets that are a good fit for us. So we're starting to work all over the country doing Passive House-focused work in a lot of states. The house I'm going to talk about today is the Madison House. It's a small certified passive house that we built in a very urban lot in downtown Olympia. It's about as downtown as you can get before you start to get into large commercial lots and multifamily. It's a really sweet little house. It had its challenges in certification just because it's small. And I know anyone who's done a small passive house has experienced some of those challenges. But you know, one of our big focuses was how to put a house in an existing neighborhood. So even an eclectic neighborhood like this one in Olympia, there's always a degree of trauma when you develop an undeveloped lot. So we were really focused on the scale and keeping the scale small and trying to be respectful of, the neighborhood that already was there. Here's our tiny little footprint. It's about 1358 TFA. It's a 2-bedroom, 2-bath with a pretty substantially sized bike bedroom, as we coined. The owners are some baby boomers that actually met bicycling, and it's one of their passions. So that was a pretty big focus of the design, the staging, to be able to wash off bikes and put them away. And as you can see, there's not a lot of fluff. It's pretty small and it's pretty straightforward in terms of the layout. Lots of storage though. Some of the salient points for passive house nerds like ourselves is there's about 6 inches of foam under the slab. A lot of our work still tends to have that kind of slab and foam relationship, although we've definitely been able to achieve foam free in almost every other regard with most of our structures these days. The foam does tend to still be happening in the foundation. And I know there's some fun stuff coming out. So I'm excited to get away from that, hopefully in the not too distant future. R41 in the walls, R80 in the ceiling, a Zender Novus. I think since we did this house, we've switched to the Paul, which I believe is more efficient. IntelliHot Combi unit, Zola Thermo Plus clad windows. And then we're in a climate zone 4 with about 51 heating degree days, if that gives you a sense of our climate. Olympia proper actually gets about 15% less sun than Seattle. So that does create some challenges for modeling hyperlocally. We did certify this with FIAS, but Mr. Schuyler, who did our energy modeling for us, there he is, did look at both certifications. Excuse me. We try to do that on most of our work because we do tend to find weaknesses or shortcomings of the design when we model it with the expectation of certifying in either certification, PHI or FIAS. And so this one we did certify with FIAS, but as you can see from the quote there from Schuyler, with a few tweaks, we could have certified it through PHI as well. Here's the lot you can see in the top there. That's actually 2 lots. So this created an interesting design constraint in that the lot is quite small, as you could see, since it's just the lot to the left there. But its southern lot is going to be developed. There's no question about it, but we just don't know what's going to be put there, right? We don't know who's going to buy it or what they're going to build. So that became a focus that we'll get into in a moment. You can see the foam being laid around our foundation detail. You can see the sand, which you'll see in the next detail, where they've trenched with even just their fingers for the plumbing and the electrical runs they want in the subfloor. So this is a detail that we've probably used on over 20 passive houses. It's regionally speaking, it's a good detail for us because we do live in a seismic zone. So there's some challenges in that you want to move the seismic hold downs into the heated envelope of the building. And then you also have to be able to build this detail in the wet. So we're able to lay the bottom foam, form up for the footings, get the sand in, and then it can sit and it can be as wet as we want it to be for as long as it needs to be. And then we can come in with the Visqueen and pour the slab on one good dry day. And so in terms of sequencing, it's pretty powerful. Here's some pictures during construction. You can see the netting for the dense pack insulation. You can see some Intello that they're going to wrap around a detail there next to the OSB. This did have a hard lid, but we did use some Intello to solve a couple of tricky connections. And you can see the HRV sort of in its little sheetrocked nook that we created for it. So we'd only have to install it once instead of dry fit it and then put it back in. We've done a ton of different walls at the Artisans group on a ton of different kinds of passive houses. This one, when we're doing a site-built house, we've sort of settled on a 2x8 with 2x4 staggered framing with 2 to 4 inches of rigid insulation, either the wood fiber or for some of our earlier work we did foam, but we've mostly gotten away from that. But these days we're actually doing mostly prefab. So most of our custom homes are being built by Collective Carpentry. They have a couple of really fabulous foam-free walls that I'm a big fan of. And they're just, generally speaking, a really qualified and wonderful passive house company to work with. But this one was site built, and we did use the wall here that's circled in red. Here you can see some of its radiant qualities. Because this has become sort of our standard for when we're doing a site built passive house wall in our region, we did have it thermally modeled by Skylar. And there he is again, look at the face. So this is a fun little detail on this project. I feel like with passive houses, you're always struggling with a couple things, you know, like the forehead of having a thick roof. You're always struggling with porches and how they connect to the rest of the building. You know, are you going to create a thermal bridge and do blocking? Are you, you know, how are you going to handle that? So on this particular house, because we had a full porch that was wrapping around, we actually chose to hide basically secondary posts that support the porch in a faux wall that essentially is just a deeper rain screen. So because you can't see that they're not in plane together from any real direction, the siding covers it, you can't tell it's there, and we were able to separate the structures and bare the slab for the deck out here on this uninsulated slab and really keep them separate so there's no thermal bridging. In this house below on the bottom left, we actually chose to leave the structure exposed and did it with steel. So those are two different solutions that we've explored for two different passive houses. So like I said, we weren't sure what was going to be built to the south. And so that created some challenges for how we were going to articulate the building. We wanted to make it so that if someone built, since it is a small lot, in all likelihood a 2-story structure, that we wouldn't lose all of the solar exposure that's heating our building. So we articulated the great spaces and the sort of second height with the clerestory over to the north as far as we possibly could. This is also a fun little study I did with Evan at Zola Windows, who is another lovely person to work with if you're looking for a good window vendor. And he worked this up for me. Me and him taught a class about how to design windows inexpensively for passive houses. And of course the frame is expensive and the glass is not. You know, the glass is the best performing part and the frame is the least performing part. So we're trying to always get the biggest opening we can with the best ratio between glass and frame. So even just on this one little facade that faces south, on these 4 windows, if you were to break them into 8 windows, just a little bit more frame per window, you can see that the 5.6 annual heat demand of kilobTUs per square foot per year that we certified goes all the way up to 5.98, almost 6 kilobTUs per square foot per year. And this is just one tiny array. But again, it's sort of that challenge of small buildings and how sensitive they are to the window layout. This is our window detail. It's pretty straightforward. We do tend to adjust it depending on what builder we're working with for the work we're doing now. Although we do always suggest we over insulate the frames. You know, no matter how good the window you buy, you're still going to have the frame that's holding it, which is a weakness in the whole assembly. So we sometimes vary between the backer rod or the expanding foam tape that you can stick on there and it expands over a few hours. But we do generally have a detail faintly similar to this one. Here's the radiant performance of this window design. You can see that overframing is making a really big difference. This is another detail we include in a lot of our passive houses that I'm fond of. And that's instead of you know, creating entirely false ceilings, which I feel like we did a lot more in the beginning in our early work, we use the truss bays and then really cleverly little soffitted details to run all the HRV ducting for the house. So we're not going to pay for a whole second ceiling. The way we do that is we just step into the truss bay either with a hard lid like OSB, or you can use you know, Intello and other membranes, things of that nature too, to do this sort of thing. But you can really just displace very, very, very little insulation and really create a nice chaseway for yourself to do some of that forward thinking, some of that planning. Here's some finished photos of the house. It was very well accepted by the neighborhood, which is always, like I said, challenging in an existing culture, tight-knit community like that. The bike bedroom doing its job. This home was featured in the Downsize book by Sherry Coons, her most recent book. And not only did she feature this home, but also the home, another passive house that we did in Port Townsend. So it's pretty cool that there's I think there's even more. I'm trying to remember, but there's several passive houses in the book, which is, I imagine, why Lloyd so graciously wrote some quotes on the back of it. And yeah, Sherry Kuntz is a really wonderful author, and we were really honored to be featured in her book about downsizing. These are the clients. They're absolutely lovely. It's the best part of my job. It's getting to work with wonderful people. And, oh, also notice that little porch detail we talked about was a great place to put these steel L brackets to hold up that floating bench that they wanted. So that didn't have to be a thermal bridge because of that little faux deeper rain screen detail that we did. So that's really the end of my case study, but I'm just gonna throw a few more things at the end here. I think a lot of people that are in this group are practicing professionals, and I think we're all dealing with, you know, how to pivot our firms and how to keep them relevant during COVID and trying to think smarter and not harder. So my firm applied for the PPP funding, which we did receive for the next 8 weeks, God help us. And we are using it to fund the development of some passive house plan sets that you can just buy online. So we have been pushing pretty hard on this for a few weeks, and we hope to get it live pretty quickly, but we're gonna have a lot of options. So we're gonna have some really cool you know, prefab designs. We're gonna be working with Collective Carpentry to have some, so that they can be ready with pricing and things like that. We're gonna have duplexes, some passive house duplexes or townhouses that we've designed. We've been working with Habitat for Humanity, and we've taken those designs and pushed them a little bit further into the passive home realm, and we're gonna have those plan sets ready for developers to buy. We have some prefab ADUs that are some really lovely designs. I'm hoping to talk Zach into putting one in his backyard. So we're working on that. And then we're also gonna have some passive house ADUs that are smaller and more modest, more cost effective, because we do really believe in density, and that's a great, a very small but great way that cities can start to take steps towards that. So we'll have lots of fun, modern, above garage, slab, lots of different passive house options, and we're pretty excited for people to be able to easily purchase them. And then we can, you know, always facilitate permitting and, you know, whatever else people need. But we'd really love for these to be accessible products to the general public. So one thing I will say is when we get to discussion, it would be great to get feedback from people about, especially such a great group of professionals, about what something like this should cost. That's been really heavily debated in the office. You know, there's definitely the standpoint of we want people to be able to afford them. And then there's also that point where devaluing your work doesn't help your industry. So we are having those discussions, and I would love any feedback about that. So that'll be going live soon. The amazing Rusa Cassell is heading that up. And with that, that is my presentation, and I will stop sharing.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, thanks,
So,
guys.
Sean, have you had some questions queued up?
Got a couple. Kristen Pegu, you've got the one to start off, and there's been a couple follow-ups, and then we've got Scott. If not, I will ask it on your behalf.
Well, Kristen isn't here, but Christian is.
Oh, sorry. Again,
I get that all the time. Don't worry about that. Doctor's office. Kristen, is there a Kristen here? Sorry. Anyway, Tessa, I was wondering, for your plan home designs, how do you account for different climates?
So what we've done is we've said that they're regionally appropriate. And so we're going to put a disclaimer that says, you know, we've designed these for our region, and to reach out to us and discuss with us some of the changes necessary. If you say wanted to buy it and put it in Florida, then we would probably just make those changes on an hourly basis, and they could still buy the plan sets, and we would just adjust the assemblies accordingly. But they are designed sort of for like our Northern California, Oregon, Montana, Washington, like that sort of region where our climates are similar enough. And then we would plan to just adjust them. But, you know, it does still apply, like pretty much anything of the northern climates sort of across the, you know, Maine. I mean, you know, a lot of the climates I think would be appropriate, but we would just want to study them if people were going to buy them who are pretty far away.
Okay, great. Thanks. Scott, want to come on?
Yeah, hey Tessa, just curious. So it seems like Pacific Northwest and East Coast is kind of the hotbed for Passive House. My question was, what have you seen in the middle region-wise where the market has started to demand it?
So we have a couple of cool projects. We have one in Green Bay, which is for a young woman who's getting funding to do college housing. I think 4 or 5 students live in a passive house, basically. And she's a powerhouse. I believe her company is Give a Damn, Design Like You, what is it? Oh, I'm gonna get it wrong. I'm gonna forget for a second. Feel free to chime in, Rusa, if you can remember her company. It's just slipping my mind for the moment, but she's doing great work, and that's in Wisconsin, you know, and that's not exactly, I haven't heard a lot about Wisconsin in the passive house world. Then of course we've got a developer we're working with in Austin who is doing these really lovely passive houses that we're designing multifamily kind of little neighborhoods because of their zoning. And he actually just listed one on Sotheby's and it just sold. So we're kind of excited about that. So those are kind of the things I'm aware about that aren't just on the coast. But we also have someone working with in North Carolina. We've got some work in Montana. So, it's a good question, but yeah, we're definitely working mostly on the coast.
Would love to see how they marketed it from a real estate perspective. Sounds like it was a speculative project and how they did.
They are. Yeah, and it's kind of cool. The developer was building passive houses in Philadelphia, sort of in the very beginning, just like when we were getting into passive house too. And then he moved to Austin and he didn't do passive houses for a while. And now he's sort of getting into that market. And what I can do is, I'm not sure how to do it, but I can figure it out, is that I will post the real estate link for you guys to see in the chat.
Wow. Okay. Lots of questions now, so I'm trying to keep track of them all. Danny from Toronto, you're next.
Hi, Tessa. Thanks for sharing. I was wondering if energy modeling had been done, and if so, what that energy intensity was for the project. Thank you.
Can you clarify, do you mean the case study or one of the prefab plans, or?
I mean for the project that you were just talking about, the house.
Yes, so I can actually, should I share my screen again and pull up the PHPP for you? Is that what you wanted? Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, just a second, let me allow that. Okay, there you go, you should be able to now.
Story of my life, doing something I'm not allowed to do. Let me figure out. 2 seconds and I'll get back to the PHPP here. And Zach, I'm not sure, are we gonna post this online afterwards? Is there like a place we put these or something?
Yeah, if you're amenable, we've had requests already.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm happy to share the slide.
Cool. And we'll also have a video available.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so here we go. Here's the PHPP. Awesome. I'll just, okay. Is it okay if I stop sharing that now? Okay, thanks, Danny.
Perfect, great stuff. Monty, I'm gonna hold on your question a bit. Peter Moonen, come on in.
Yeah, thanks Tessa for a great presentation. I know that Sean would have been really interested in this because of footprints and laneways and infill homes, which are sort of starting to appear more and more desired in density areas like Vancouver. You mentioned that this one was site built, but that you also, you prefer to do offset. Have you done a quality and price comparison between site built? And I'm thinking, when I think of costs, I'm thinking of time and then also the quality of how do you deal with special insulations if you've got a rainy weather and you're still on site built. And also with an offset stud, 2x4 studs, is that problematic with how they're built on site? So I know that's more than one question, so shoot me later. Thanks.
Well, let's start with the prefab because I'm really excited about that. We have been working with a contractor by the name of Field Assembly, Dave Canfield. If you're in the Pacific Northwest, he's a absolutely fantastic passive house builder. And he actually was our production manager when we were a design build firm and we did construction. So he went out on his own. He's very successfully building a lot of our passive houses. And he kind of got the bug. We had a client that was really interested in prefab. We hooked up with Collective Carpentry and they were really technically proficient, able to answer all of our questions. and they've come down and done that project, which went really well. So that builder actually did a comparison, and he really felt after he had considered the reduction of overhead due to the calendar being so much more short, and sort of the peace of mind, being able to build in the wet with quality control, he really felt like there was maybe a 5 or maybe a 10% difference between site built and prefab at first. And my understanding is that after he's done one now, he's actually thinking it's relatively a wash. So, you know, when we sell it to our clients, we never tell them it's going to be cheaper. I think that's, you know, a pipe dream right now, especially for a preferred product, I think, like a passive house assembly walls. But I do think that it's probably going to be the way we do a lot of our custom homes, since it is essentially financially a wash.
My concern is that where we live I'm up north, just west of Vancouver, so it's a similar weather to you. You want to put more and more, whether it's electrical or plumbing or ducting, or even as they do in Europe, gyprock and exterior cladding. But that poses problems if you've got a really, really wet site and really windy site. So I'm just curious whether you notice any difference in quality or sort of end results afterwards.
I will say that I do believe that the quality of a prefab home is better. You know, I feel like everything's a little tighter. I feel like the tolerances are really, really snug. I do like that it's a very reliably dry assembly the whole time. We build in the wet, we still site build in the wet, and then we bring in giant dehumidifiers and we dehumidify the framing, and we moisture meter it and check it, make sure it's below 12, 13%, things like that. So I wouldn't say that you're getting a less quality product by site building, but I think there's many appealing attributes to the prefab. I think that I plan to build my own passive house in a year or two. I plan to prefab it. Rusa, my co-principal, she's building her own passive house. She's going to have it prefabbed. So I think that's a ringing endorsement too, that when left to our own devices to do our own houses, that's the way we're going. And then I think you had a 2x4 question. For the life of me, I can't remember if there was any feedback from the carpenters on that project. You know, we built that wall so many times that I feel we kind of got the bugs worked out of it.
I was just thinking about, normally those walls are built on the platform and then lifted up. But if you've got an offset, you've got an alignment issue with the stud on the top, unless you flip it over, but you don't have a big footprint. So it was just the logistics of how you manage a site-built double stud wall.
You know, I don't remember how they built it or how they stood it. I imagine they still built it and stood it from just probably flipped it, like you said, I would think, but I'm not sure. I could talk to the people, my folks that built it at the time, and we could email about it if it's an important factor. I don't really recall. I'm sorry.
Nope, good stuff. Again, in the after hours, we can talk prefab, and I'm trying to get the collective carpentry guys to come back after they've done their daddy duties, but we'll see if I can get them back for the after hour. Scott Kennedy, you had a question. Scott, I'm going to ask. Oh, there you go. Go for it.
For some reason, the space bar didn't work. So anyways, I'm going to take two questions since now I got the floor. First one was, we're hearing now that it's easier to do the air control layer maybe with a membrane rather than taping OSB and things like that. Have you got some experience on that?
So, most of the homes that I built when I was a design build firm, I went with the hard lid and I went with taped OSB for my air control. With the collective carpentry, we have been doing much more of the membrane. And I will say it's working. We haven't done our final blower door test, obviously, but we're achieving results, I think, that will be adequate. There is something in me, and I'm not sure, like when you go on site and you see the membrane hanging there and like it's tattered, and you can just tell that it's been scarified by the process of construction. Like there's something in me that gets faintly uncomfortable. But I think from a resource management point, we have to get away from the OSB. Like I don't think the OSB is a great solution, but I did have good success with it. I don't know if that speaks to your question.
Well, that does. The second part of my question was, when you put this slab or the insulation below the sand, are you basically increasing your thermal envelope a bit by 6 or 8 inches? And is that causing some issues?
You are. So there's a trade-off. You're increasing your surface area, which of course affects your energy performance negatively, but you're also introducing mass. And although I don't think that the PHPP or WFI really models the mass, I don't want to say it doesn't model it accurately. I think it doesn't attribute enough value to mass, I think would be a way to put it. A lot of our clients in our climate are not doing air conditioning, and we're getting hotter and hotter every summer, of course. And I'm finding that the homes I did with more mass perform better than the homes I did with less mass. And so I like that detail because sand is cheap, and the mass does really even out those big diurnal, swings between hot and cool in the summer. And I feel like there's good benefits for the user.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, guys, great questions. I'm going to turn it over to Monty.
Awesome. Zach, are we going to do another breakout, or do I have time to squeeze a question on my own?
No, you have time. I'd say we have with 3 minutes.
Have you thought, first of all, thanks for great presentation. I love your details. I love the house, and I'm really excited about the package designs. Have you thought about detailing these for self-build? One of the more interesting bits of feedback we got from a project a few years ago, we did a really great, fully modular, volumetric modular project in a remote First Nations community. And about a year later, some of the elders in the community came to us really politely and said, we love you, really nice folks, but we hate your project because we felt like this was made by settlers down in the Lower Mainland, dropped in like a spaceship on our land, when we have an entire community full of underemployed people who would really like to work. And even if it cost more and took longer, we'd rather build our own homes. I'm also aware that the high point of the Sears Roebuck packaged housing was at the beginning and the end of the Depression, when people had a lot of time on their hands and sparse cash, and they were looking for ways to get in a house. Have you thought about kind of pitching these things as simple enough with the right set of components that a person could, reasonably competent person could build their own house?
Yeah, so we're planning to try to have products in different sort of brackets. So we're having homes that are going to be sort of a collaboration with Collective Carpentry and their prefab.
Yep.
And of course, there's a little bit of a premium attached to that, or maybe a wash. Although I will say, I think that self-build is a lot more achievable if you did have it prefabbed. I do think that like the framing is the best place to fail as a common person. Like, if I was like gonna have my friend build a house, I would recommend they prefab it if they're gonna try and general it themselves,
That's not where the money is.
Exactly. And then we're going to have another tier that isn't designed to be prefab, because the plan sets do look quite different and the permitting elements are quite different. And so those do have a lot of passive house detailing that I would still say in general, our detailing is pretty like layman focused. I would say most of the materials you can get at Home Depot, and that makes them less boutique. Like a lot of our stuff, maybe isn't the most sustainable or the most green, fabulously perfect material you could pick, but it's a material that's readily available and cost effective. And if someone's going to build a house, they're going to build a better house with this. So we're not letting perfection be the death of good. And that bracket of housing is going to be net zero focused. So the detailing isn't going to be maybe as intense as passive house, but it's going to have elements that are in that vein. And I do think those would be very buildable for someone with a basic understanding of construction. And then the ADUs, those little structures, those are really simple. And we actually developed those because the local 3 cities, Lacey, Olympia, and Tumwater, where we live, where our firm is located, actually found funding and hired us to design ADUs that they could give to their constituents for free. So we've designed those for them. The city has them on hand. And when you walk in and say, hey, I've got a lot in Olympia, Tumwater, or Lacey, they hand you a completely pre-approved ADU set for one of those ADUs you saw. So we are going to take those, and although our energy code is very stringent in Washington and they have a lot of energy efficient detailing, we're going to push them a little closer to passive house for the sets we sell online, or they may be passive house depending on your climate and your lot and all that jazz. And those I think will be extremely simple, that like sort of falling off a log, Sears Roebuck simple, that people could build them themselves and have them be pretty energy efficient.
Great. I'm keen to see it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Watch me talk about it publicly and then not pull it off, right? But
Zach, do we want to split up?
Yeah. So we're gonna go back into breakout rooms. We'll have a little more time for this session, more like 9 or 10 minutes. And for those of you who are new to Passive House, I encourage you to ask that question that you have in your mind about Passive House. Don't worry about how basic or it may be. And for everyone else, just reflect on what stood out for you in the presentation that Tessa just shared. So here we go. So my desktop does not show Ed, but I'm glad you can see Ed. Ed May is a Passive House practitioner and trainer and consultant and certifier extraordinaire, and he's going to be our guest speaker next week on May 13th. And he'll be sharing a really cool multifamily project in Hoboken, New Jersey, Candela Lofts. So you won't want to miss that. And next, we're going to have just a really quick orientation from Andy Huh, who is going to talk a little bit about the Community Questions and Answers Forum, because that's a good place to get more information about these projects that our presenters are presenting on. So Andy, take it away.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Just one second. Okay, great. Can everyone see it?
Yes.
Okay, so we quietly launched the new Q&A community platform about a month ago. By quietly, I mean it's here in the link right here. And if you click on it, you're presented to the community platform here. So we now have 160 users and almost 100 questions added. And so whether you're a total beginner or an experienced veteran, this is the place to ask and answer all of your questions related to Passive House. And so one of the questions we got today, which I thought would be a good question in the community platform, was from Robert Arlt, which I'll paste here. Are there good links papers to embodied carbon of foam versus non-foam envelopes? I'm going to click on ask. And so if anyone knows the answer to that, feel free to just log in, register, and answer it. We tried to organize it in a way that made sense. So if you go to all topics here, we categorized it into the basic principles of Passive House. And if I click on thermal bridging, for example, you get to see all the questions related to thermal bridging. And so in this example, Ed May posted a question regarding party wall thermal bridge calculation. And if anyone knows the answer to this particular question, does anyone have a good example of calculating a thermal bridge up against another building? Here's the detail. As of right now, there's no answers, but if anyone knows the answer, feel free to go in and just hit reply and answer it directly. And so this is one of the best ways to help grow the Passive House community, is by continuing to ask any questions you have and going in and answering any questions that you feel like you have the answer to. And the reason why is because all these questions and answers live forever on the internet, and whoever is Googling it, the goal is for this to be a one-stop source for all questions and answers related to Passive House, which seem to not exist in the world, but we're hoping to bridge that gap. So that's all I got here.
Thanks, Andy.
That's how you know you're like an old person in North America. What? I was muted again. Really, really great to see your work, Tessa. Thanks so much for sharing. And I look forward to seeing everybody again next week.
Yeah, thank you, Monty. It was a real pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me, guys. I'm really honored.
Okay. We're always happy to see your shiny face, Tessa. Yeah. You gonna stick around for a while for the after hours?
Yeah, I was gonna stay for a bit. I feel like maybe I didn't get to everybody's questions too, yeah. So I'm hanging around if people want to chat more.
Great, I've got a list 4 that are already ready to go, so that's fantastic. So we will conclude another of the main event in a matter of a few seconds. We'll swap over to the after hour. So thanks again for everyone joining us, for coming to another fast, factual, and fun event, as Fat Man has taken over for the after hour party. Let's get her on. Woohoo!